This is Joshua Burge of the Revenant, and you're listening to the Monday Morning Critic Podcast.
Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Safe thing to do is track a new course back up on land.
Then what we gonna do? Sit out there like a bunch of goddamn ducks? You and your half-breed son get to walk on out? I'm talking to you.
The proper thing to do would be to finish him off quick.
He's to be cared for as long as necessary.
I understand.
Get away! Help!
What happened?
We did what we had to do. He was buried right.
All I had was my boy, and he took him from me, you understand? He's afraid. He knows how far I came to find him.
So, man, there's so much to talk about with you. I won't keep you too long, but geez, your life is just, it's pretty amazing just going through a lot of what you've been through. You know, you were on another interview and I was listening, you know, and I feel like your roots are in upper state New York. And then I feel like your family, I don't know if it's just you or you and your family kind of uprooted and went to Michigan. Is that intro to your life correct, Josh?
It is an intro to my life, but it's not quite as a big sort of impact that I think I know the interview that you're speaking of.
Yeah.
And Adam Shardoff is his name. He was in upstate New York. So we got on the topic of upstate New York.
Gotcha.
And I lived there the first 3 years of my life. My younger sister was born there. But shortly thereafter, we moved to Michigan. And bounced around Michigan most of my life. So Michigan played a much bigger role in my coming of age, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, and Michigan's a wonderful place. What I'm saying, it's just too bad the places are so similar, right? It's too bad you couldn't have gone from like upper state New York to like, I don't know, Florida or Hawaii or someplace tropical, I guess.
Yeah, no, my family's definitely all upper Midwest and East Coast and where it's cold and things are hard.
Yeah, for sure. You know, before we get to the movie portion of your life, the acting portion of your life, you're a very, very, very talented singer, guitarist, songwriter. You know, I wasn't ready when I was listening to a lot of your songs. I wasn't ready for the voice that came. Not that I was expecting you to sound a certain way, but I don't know. People look at different performers and they have an idea of what that person could sound like, right? They're not always right. You know, Adele has this super powerful voice you'd never guess, right? Maybe sure. Ed Sheeran has this voice that you'd never guess would. And I'm not saying, you know, that that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I just feel like your voice is like a really powerful voice. Wasn't really expecting that from you, but you're very talented, just to say the least.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've heard that before, that my voice is a lot deeper than maybe people expected upon first glance.
Yes.
Just because of my slight build, very slender, skinny, not the tallest, most imposing figure in the world. And for whatever reason, I have that very low, from the lungs and gut sort of deep kind of tenor baritone sort of thing going on that I very much try to embrace.
Yeah, there's almost a smidge of like Joe Cocker in there, right? There's just a little, it's not that powerful, deep voice,
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just recently got back into writing and recording music, working on a record or an album for the first time in 10 years. So my voice has even changed, I've noticed, in this past 10 years. Now, I picked up some bad habits when I was younger, namely cigarette smoking, and it tends to have an impact. So it's fun in a way, and also somewhat somber to go back and listen to some of the earliest records and what a tender sort of voice that I had, and just along the way, it's just gotten lower and scratchier, and but you try to do the best you can with it and utilize it, and hopefully it works in the songs that are being written to sing.
Yeah, that's really well said. And, when you look at, and I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times as well, when you look, professionally as a musician, who are the artists or bands that you gravitate to? Who are the people that, if you're home with you're a great follow on Instagram for those listening, by the way. I believe you're very close to your cat, right? You're a cat guy, is that right?
Yeah, it's my girlfriend's cat, but I love cats, and he's my buddy, and we spend a lot of time together for sure. He's a Bengal. Mr. Miyagi is his name, and he's always excited to see me whenever I go over there, and I'm excited to see him, and we're best mates.
Yeah, and I'm a dog guy, so I completely like we have three, but one in particular. He's my son. Like, I totally get it, But I'm not going to gloss over the fantastic name of Mr. Miyagi for 1 second. That is phenomenal.
I know, it's hilarious. I don't know the origin. I mean, obviously the Karate Kid, but I don't know the owner. The full story is a little convoluted.
Right.
If I'm being honest, how Mr. Miyagi ended up in the possession of my girlfriend, but he's a peach. I love him. Yeah.
You seem like a person who has a good rapport. And I always believe animals are a real test of what a person's like, right? Because I feel like when people come to the house over the years, I feel like they have these instincts, and I believe that's very telling. So who are the artists that you think that are really that you gravitate to, Josh? That really kind of motivate you, that you throw on, and if you're at home, you throw them on, or you're listening in your iPod when you're writing, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. Who are those influences for you?
The biggest one that actually made me want to buy a guitar when I was a teenager. This is going to date myself a little bit, but when the original Beatles anthology aired back in the 90s, my family was not a Beatles family. We were a Johnny Cash family, Woody Guthrie, the Carpenters, my grandfather loved Sinatra and things like that. But for whatever reason, the Beatles weren't really a big part of my growing up, despite the fact that my parents were very much of that age. But so when I saw the Beatles for the first time, I'm like, I bet that's fun to do, to play a guitar with your friends and make music. And so that was the first thing. Soon after that, because I was a Beatles fan, I found out about Bob Dylan as well, and became a huge Bob Dylan fan. And just from there, that's where writing music and lyrics, that was the most basic concrete foundation at a very young age. But from there, then certainly Motown in the early 60s, a lot of British invasion stuff after that in the early 60s, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones, the Animals, earlier rock and roll, Buddy Holly, a lot of old stuff. Actually, I was kind of always been out of step with my generation, or things that were going on at contemporary sense. But there were artists like Beck that were around in the 90s that I just loved. It was very refreshing to have him around. But yeah, Lou Reed, Velvet Underground. But man, a lot of this stuff I say like between 1955 and 1965 or 56 and 66, like the sounds of those recordings, just that's what I put on. That's my go-to almost universally when I'm listening to music.
Yeah, that's well said. And I have to tell you, and I've said this before, Joshua, that I if you ask me to name right now in the last 10 years, name me 5 really good rock bands right now, I couldn't do it. Ask me that same question in the 70s and the 80s and maybe the 90s, I could do it in a second. Like, I feel like I can't, and that's not to say there aren't good rock bands. I'm not saying that by any means, but I couldn't name 5 really, really good rock bands that I would go out of my way to listen to on iTunes. I mean, maybe that's over the top, but that's just how I feel. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that as well. I think the last time that I was really paying attention to rock bands was probably when I was more involved in it. I was kind of around it more, but that would have been even, between 2007 and 2012 maybe. So that's 10 years ago. So I honestly, I don't know if it's because there's so much content now that I just could no longer keep track and keep up or what's going on. But, there's still great music, but I just feel like I feel overwhelmed with the amount of access to it and just how to find it. The way that I found out about music was word of mouth or, some magazines, NME and CMJ, Spin, Rolling Stone, sure, but the internet wasn't as prolific in the 90s and early 2000s, and it certainly wasn't what it is now. So now it's just everybody, it's just out there, which is awesome. It's great, but it's also a bit overwhelming. So I've kind of gone back and reverted to word of mouth. And if somebody else is like listening to something, I'm like, hey, what's this? Like that's great, but I can't keep up with what's the hottest, who's streaming the most and all of that. That's just, it's well beyond me at this point to try to keep track of.
Yeah, I mean, the days of I feel like throwing cassette tape in the car and listening so much you burned it out pretty much, or the days of being excited for a CD. Those days are, I don't know. I mean, I know vinyl's making a big comeback, but I just feel like it's a time gone by. But my last music question to you is, I feel like we talk about the best of all time, and Beatles are, many would consider the best. Who I feel like Joshua has left out of that conversation a lot, and the death of John Bonham probably had a lot to do with it, is Led Zeppelin. I feel like they are, I remember there's certain groups when I heard for the first time, I listened to one song, Beatles are obviously like this, I listened to one song, and then the next one was as good as the first, and you kept going on and on. They never had a dud. It was like, God, right. I've never heard anything like this before. It just blows you off your feet. I mean, I don't know how you feel about Led Zeppelin, but from a guy that doesn't know his music as well as you do, boy, I got to tell you, that really moved me. That band really moved me growing up.
Yeah, well, Zeppelin's amazing, man. I mean, I love Led Zeppelin. It's that era is start to where, excuse me, is where I kind of start to really feel differently about music. I still love all that sound that came out of the late 60s and into the early 70s, and Led Zeppelin, Alice Cooper, again, Lou Reed, David Bowie, MC5, Stooges, Iggy Pop. I kind of start, because it's sonically so insane, and what studios were able to do and how they were able to capture this sound. Now players like Bonham specifically, and Jimmy Page and Robert Plant's voice, that's a power that is relatively unmatched. I know a lot of people draw the comparisons with a current band, Greta Van Fleet, but that's great that they're doing that. That's awesome, but that template had been made, So every drummer in the world, tries to find whatever, if you have the hardware for it, or digitally if you have the plugin, to find the magic. And I'm blanking right now on the actual piece of equipment to find the compression for and to get that Bonham sound. It's just between Bonham, Keith Moon, I guess. I mean, there's others as well, but that to me is the foundation of what you think of rock. When it grew up into it was just all encompassing by that point. Music had just exploded. Rock and roll had just exploded into this powerful form for larger audiences, for arenas, it was just the late 60s and early 70s kind of like that. When I think in my brain, that's kind of what I imagine, certainly the Rolling Stones as well in that era, but Led Zeppelin's just unbelievable. And there's such great players. And I'm personally not a great player by any means. Like I kind of like, I feel like I have some good ideas that I can kind of put together, but that's why I hesitate to leave Led Zeppelin off of my most influential or whatever list, because they're just above me so far that I just don't feel like it's attainable. They're obviously incredible and amazing, and I love listening to Led Zeppelin, but like I was never the one that like sat down and tried to figure out like what Jimmy Page is doing on guitar. Like that was just so beyond me. I couldn't figure it out. Like it was just, but they're obviously incredible.
Yeah, that's really well said. So how do we make the transition, right, from, I mean, I know some of this answer, but how do we make the transition from, because the good part about you is you pick two professions, right, where it's easy to get a job, movies and music, right? There's no stress. The work is consistent.
Yeah. They're handing them out.
Yeah, they're handing the jobs out like crazy. But, I mean, you're a great, talented musician, right? So that's a very difficult field, obviously. Becoming an actor, very difficult. Where do you make that not the change, because you're still doing music, but where do you start to progress towards acting? Where does that break come from you, Joshua?
Well, it was really kind of one thing led into another. They're very much related. And so when I went, and wow, yeah, it's, even going back to when I picked a major before I went to university, since I was a young kid, I wanted to major in filmmaking. I wanted to be a director and a writer, and that's what I went to university for. And while I was there, I got the music bug. I started playing music more as I was writing more, and I was performing the songs, and that was really thrilling for me. And I wanted to do it at other places, namely New York City or Chicago or, major cities, and kind of have that experience that I'd heard about, like songwriters, meeting other songwriters. Like I wasn't sure if that was just something that happened in the 50s and 60s or if that was still going on or not, so I was very intrigued by that. And I just started getting into music really heavily. I left university and I didn't finish. And so I just pursued music, and that became such a big part of my life until about 2009, I think it was, when Joel Petrikis, filmmaker, asked me. He had been a fan of the band that I was in, Chance Jones, at the time, and he asked me to star in a short film that he was making, because he thought, if you could perform on stage, then you could probably perform in front of a camera as well. And so I jumped back into the chance to get back into making films and movies, because I had kind of lost my way as far as figuring out how to do that. I kind of it fell by the wayside. So I was ecstatic to be able to do that. And so there was overlap there where him and I were making films, and I was still doing music with the band, and it was great. And then when I got the call to audition in the Revenant, and eventually I got that part, then I decided that I should probably start focusing on acting a little bit more, and music kind of went by the wayside a little bit, and so it just kind of, that's the way it went. And now with the pandemic that happened, I was in my apartment by myself again for weeks and months on end, and decided to get back into music again now that that's happening. I could do that. I was just by myself, and I had the time and ability to go back into that focus. So to me, they're interchangeable, and they work hand in hand really well. There's certainly different parts of the brain that are activated by both, and there's a little bit of a switch that needs to happen from the creative aspects of music into acting, and the way that you think about it and approach it. And there's different disciplines, but I don't really know how to separate them, I don't think, anymore, And
you know what, Joshua, I was thinking this just as you're talking, like, and you don't have to, right? You could still do both. I mean, I have actors on all the time, or musicians that are actors, vice versa. They love both, and they'll never give up one or the other. I mean, no one says, what I'm saying? Like, you could do both for the rest of your life.
Right. They're both so amazingly fascinating to me, regardless of what happens. I do foresee myself doing these things for the rest of my life. Like, I became fascinated with these crafts and getting better at them, and I love them. And, hopefully when you love something and enjoy something and you're fascinated by it, that means that you're going to naturally want to improve, and get better. So, as time goes on, I always think of this Steve Martin quote where they asked him, when he picked up the banjo, he's like, I was terrible, but I thought to myself, if I just learned a little bit each day, by the time I'm in my 60s, I'll be a pretty good banjo player. And, that's kind of like, regardless of whether or not he was a famous banjo player or anything, like he didn't care. Like it was just like, by the time I'm older, like I'll be good at this because I love it and it's great, and that's kind of the way I approach music and filmmaking for that matter,
Yeah.
Because,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just gonna say because you can't. We joked earlier that it's the success rates are highly improbable. They're not impossible, but it's very difficult thing to have. We'll say monetary success at. Like it's people that try it, and it's well known that it's obviously a very difficult thing, especially as things are changing so rapidly with technology and formats and mediums and everything else that goes along with it. It's an incredibly difficult thing to succeed at for income reasons. But I think that the rewards are so far beyond that I don't foresee myself ever not playing or not acting or not thinking about filmmaking or writing songs or any of that. It's just such a big part of my life and something that I love about every trip I've made around the sun,
Having seen Buzzard and The Revenant, I could safely say that you are certainly in the right field when it comes to acting and what we talked about with music. So there's times where I'm watching movies, Joshua, or a TV show, and I'm like, this is not like, it's almost like a boxing fight where you wish somebody would just step in. It's not good. And you wonder, sometimes it takes a team effort, but when I have people on my show and I ask them to come on, it's because I see something really good in their work and I love their work. You mentioned Joel. He's a big part of your acting part of your life, right?
The biggest.
Yeah. Do you meet him at Grand Valley State? Is that where you guys connected?
Yeah, we both attended Grand Valley at the same time, and we had mutual friends. Joel had been there. He's just a couple years older than I am, so he had been to university when I was a freshman. And like I said, I didn't attend university very long, so we had a very small window where we interacted briefly.
Gotcha.
But we had, like I said, mutual friends. So past both of our times at university, that's kind of how we reconnected later in our 20s.
How difficult was the transition? So you're in Michigan, you have opportunities that are starting to come with you. And I think it's Michigan where you start to make the trek to LA. That couldn't have been easy. Had to be difficult. You're kind of,
oh yeah.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, like, this is, some people gloss over this. Some actors gloss over this. Like, hey, it's no big deal. I just don't buy that. Like, I feel like you are just taking all your aspirations and hopes and you're gambling on yourself. That is huge. That has to come with anxiety. That has to come with some fear. Like, if you tell me you're not scared or you're not worried, I don't believe that person. Like, am I being a little over the top with that?
I don't know about those other people you speak of. Maybe they're that kind of brave or maybe oblivious. I don't know. But no, for me, it was very nerve-wracking. It was a very hard decision. It was incredibly difficult. So after Buzzard came out, there was a lot of press and a lot of great press. Great things were happening.
A lot of great press. I cannot emphasize that enough.
No, it was pretty. We were overwhelmed. We couldn't believe it. Every day there was some sort of new thing happening. It was just. We were constantly pinching ourselves, but at the same time, we were just living in Michigan, living our lives that we had been living, and we didn't know what to do with any of this information that was coming through, So I had heard from a management team that wanted me to come out to LA, to try to pursue things further, and I was just kind of on the fence. This would have been 2014. In the spring of 2014. And I was just on the fence. I had a life in Michigan that I enjoyed. I liked. I owned a house there, and I was there. And so from there, that summer I ended up, it's a whole other story in and of itself, but long story short, I got the part in The Revenant when I worked on that film for several months. And when we wrapped in 2015, I thought that was really fun. That was an amazing experience. It was all the things. It was very difficult. It was very scary. It was very fun, exhilarating. There were things I never thought I'd ever be able to do. It was just an experience, places I thought I'd never travel. It was just amazing. I was like, I wonder if I could have more experiences like that. I mean, it sounds like a simple thought, but that really was kind of my approach. And so again, I spoke with this management team and they said, well, why don't you just come out to LA for a couple months? We'll set up some meetings, kind of show you the ropes, show you places you'll go and how it works and everything and see what you think, So that was my plan, to come out to LA for a couple months. And I did in July of 2015, but I ended up loving it so much that I stayed for like a year and some change. But I still had a house, and I was in a relationship at the time, and all of these things in Michigan. I still had my life in Michigan. So I now that I knew that I did love it, in fact, I needed to figure out what in fact I wanted to do with that was very much a crossroads or a fork in the road or whatever, that I had to make some sort of decision one way or the other. I felt anyway, and, so I went back and I was there in Michigan, and I went through what could I do about the house, and I, with my girlfriend at the time, would we be able to transplant to LA? It was a long process and took it very seriously. It was nothing hasty about it. I mean, it ended up being a little over 2 years that it took me to finally make the decision that, yeah, I am going to, in fact, move to LA and sell the house. And that would be it for my life in Michigan. And, yeah, it was not an easy decision. It was nerve-wracking, and it was a nervous breakdown. It was everything. I mean, it was just so intense of it completely uprooting your life of everything you'd known. At an older age, like that's something I think is easier when you're young. When that's what I felt like when I went to New York City, or when I traveled to Chicago, or when just bumming around the country or doing whatever, like that was easy because I knew like eventually I could, whatever happened. But when you like go from a point in your life where you're like, I'm gonna settle down, make a home, buy a house, have a life in a neighborhood, so on and so forth, obviously things can change, but to pursue a career of acting and moving to a place like LA is still it's still a moonshot in a lot of ways, but I also just felt it's an amazing opportunity that not a lot of people necessarily have, people that tried their whole lives to, pursue this type of thing. I thought that would be unjust in the universe to have had some sort of opportunity like this come to me and to not do everything within my power to bring something to fruition. So I felt like it's not an obligation. But that tipped the scale a little bit to like, you're just feeling very grateful and fortunate and not wanting to squander things like that or make light of them,
No, and that makes sense. See, your story, the way you tell it, it makes so much sense to me because I feel like that's how like most people would be. They'd be torn for all the reasons you said. But when I hear this story about somebody putting their suitcase and taking their last $3.50 in a car and driving cross country, I don't know. I'm not saying people are being less than truthful. I'm just saying I just don't believe things are that simple. I feel like you're right. Maybe younger people have less, commitment, connections, roots or whatever. But I don't know, man. Your story sounds like the one that I feel like most people go through.
Yeah. I really did only have 2 suitcases, but that's because I got rid of all my stuff because I didn't want to. I couldn't afford a U-Haul, so yeah, it was just 2 suitcases on a train. But I'd saved up money. I had money to try to make a new life, But yeah, I've heard those things like George Clooney in his car with $80 or something like that. But
it's like what you said, what you said, and what you described, all that being torn in so many ways because of all those reasons. Like that's to me seems the more understandable way to kind of approach it because, like I said, it's a huge gamble. You're taking it. You said moonshot. That's a great word. Like I don't know. I think that's the way I would feel. Let me ask you this, Joshua. So before I really want to talk about your experience on the Revenant big time. But I want to talk about, maybe this is a question. Maybe I'm seeking some advice here. I don't know. So I feel like actors and musicians, and I never like to talk about myself in interviews, but I'll kind of bring a little bit of it here, right? Are kind of like podcasts and podcasters, right? Everyone seems to have one, right? I feel like anybody with a guitar has a band. Anybody that, can speak is an actor. I feel like they're a dime a dozen, right? in the world I'm in, and in the world I'm in, there's 5 million podcasts, and they're growing on and on and on. And I think I've been doing it for a while. I think I've established myself. I've done some good things. I've got miles and miles to go. But I got to tell you, sometimes you have a tendency, I do, to feel sorry for yourself, to make excuses, because there are people that don't do things the right way in the, acting, musicians, and podcasts, people that buy downloads, people that buy lists, whatever, all that other stuff. But then you have people that do things the right way. But I guess my question to you is, it's almost like you can't worry about who's in the other lane or what's going on next door or what, because it is infuriating at sometimes, because you and I know how hard you work, and I don't know if you feel this way, but from my point of view, I feel like I work my ass off to do or to get where I am. And I feel like sometimes it's I've shown real progress. There's times where it's like, damn it, that just doesn't sound right. And you're worried about everybody else, but it's like, at the end of the day, that's just rubbish, right? If you're not worried about yourself and making this version of yourself better, then you're just a phony. I mean, I don't know. That's how I feel. I guess my blundering question is, do you ever have those, I'm kind of going against millions of other actors. I'm kind of competing against the world. What's your mentality when it comes to getting a job or viewing your, people that you're in TV or movies with? How do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it just comes down to, you can only control what you're in charge of, I mean, I just try to do as much as I can. I have no control over casting decisions or anything like that, so if other people, and I don't ever feel bad if I do get a part, and I don't, there's stuff that I might want to work on or something, but when I see who's gotten the part or whatever, I think they do a great job. Like I understand all that, it's obviously very competitive and everybody wants to do it, everybody's trying to do it. So the most you can do is just study and try to learn as much as you can, absorb as much as you can, and work as hard as you can on what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, there's not going to be any time, or it won't do you any good. And it certainly won't be productive to spend time angry about other people's success or however that's happening for them, because there's a million factors that go into it, and luck is certainly one of them. And I don't know, man. It's just, that's kind of how I see it. Because I've read for so many things that I would have loved to have had, and I feel like I really did a good job in the audition, and I've gotten callbacks or things like that, and for one reason or another, it just doesn't happen, and I just have to be content knowing that, at that time in my life, I really did do the best I can. Now, as time goes on, I might learn something new, and but you can't look back at that and say, I wish I knew that back when I did that. That's a never ending game that it'll drive you mad, So
yeah, it is. You're right. It's a descent into madness when you start thinking about what you're doing, what other people. It's like if you go down that road, it's almost like it's hopeless, right? Once you start worrying about who's doing what or who's, I feel like, Joshua, it's all about, like you said, controlling what you can control. Not worrying. I mean, it's so easy to say, in your shoes, and you don't sound like this type of person, but to say, I should have got that part. I'm better than so and so, or me saying, I've had this guest on or that guest on, and I thought that's a crazy game. That's insanity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see the use in it.
Yeah,
I really don't, because I mean, when I watch somebody, that is playing a part that I read for or something like that, I don't watch it and go, oh, if I had done that, maybe they would have liked it better. It's nonsense. They saw somebody in that person that they wanted to hire. And when I get hired for something, because they saw something in me that they wanted to hire then, and that's just a crazy game to try to play when you're auditioning. What might they want? That's so difficult. That's just you might as well go to Vegas and just bet it all on something if you're playing that, So you just kind of have to go with what you understand about character study and just applying it in the time that you have, from the time you get an audition to when it's got to be delivered. And if you're lucky enough to get the part, then keep going with it and go even deeper, because now that it's your part to do something with, and just always focus on what you're doing at the time, because that's enough. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with every part and every, whether it's a lead or whether you're way down on the call sheet, it doesn't matter. There's a lot to do with everyone. So, I mean, I don't know. I just really try not to think about, if I had done that, then maybe it would have worked out a little bit better. If I had made this choice instead of that, because maybe not. And some of the choices that I made that got me parts, like I could have, just something would have gone a certain way, and I would have made a different decision, a different choice, and done it a different way, and they might not have liked that. Instead, I went this way, and it's just it sounds random from my perspective, but there is like some sort of logic going on, and I don't feel privileged to that logic that's going on with casting and the director and the writers and the production and whoever else is involved. So it's tough. I'm not a master of that aspect of acting at all. I've certainly something I discussed with a lot of other actors, and they kind of feel the same way. It's just like, you just do what you can. I mean, but getting bogged down on what other people are doing, or, going into music, like another band or another artist's success or something like that, it's just like, it's the only question is, are you doing it really as much as you can with all your resources, that you have? And if the answer is truthfully yes, then that's it,
And I love what you said about being true to yourself, right? Not being what you think people want. I love that. Let me ask you this. How about, so when I get ready for interviews, I will listen to what other, not necessarily you, but a little bit you and other people, what interviews you've done, what shows you've been on, but I don't pay attention so much to what they're asking as I do how they're asking it, right? So, ironically, after I just asked you a long-winded question about acting and podcasting, but I feel like I learn a lot. Like, I feel like when I listen to other podcasts or interview shows or whatever, I feel like there's people that they get lost in talking about themselves, right? See, if I invited you on my show and I spent an hour talking about me, it would be a total waste of your time, right? And I think people want to hear your story. And I feel it happens a lot, not just with you, Josh, but I feel like it happens all the time. Do you learn like that? Like, so whether it's a part that you went for and you didn't get, or watching somebody, a role that you really love, whether it's a show you're binging or a movie you love, do you ever look at that and say, something, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it this way. I would have tweaked it like this. I love what he did here or she did here, but I would have adjusted it here. Do you ever play that game a little bit?
Yeah, but mostly it's like a parlor game,
Yeah, nothing like, not trashing somebody on the internet. Yeah, I get it.
Right. Yeah. No, I do that often, I mean, I do that with music. I do that with the Beatles. Like, I mean, I'm just like, I wonder what it sounded like if he would have done this instead, and like that would have been sweet, but it's mostly just for my own entertainment, I don't actually think that anyone's wrong or anything like that, I just kind of for fun. But yeah, there's actors that I watch, like some of their choices and stuff. I'm like, man, that is out there. I would not have thought of that, or something like, but that's just, this is part of the fun aspect of it. But
that's well said. And before we talk about The Revenant, I do want to talk about Buzzard. We talked earlier about the pub it got, AV Club Variety. I was reading these reviews today, Village Voice, RogerEbert.com. I mean, when I first was introduced to it, I'm like, okay, this is a small little indie, whatever. Boy, was I wrong on that, and then I ended up watching it, and then I'm watching these reviews.
It was a small little indie. You were right about that.
No, but I feel like I undersold it. And then when I saw it and then I read the reviews, I felt like it was much more like your voice and singing, much bigger than it lets on, right? And I feel like it moved a lot of people, right? I mean, there's a scene where you're talking to your mother in that movie and, everybody really likes me, knowing everyone watching it, knowing absolutely how alone you were in the world. What a great character Marty is. Tough place to go with a character like that, Joshua. I mean, I know it's part of quote unquote acting. I get that, but that's not an easy role.
No, it wasn't. It was hard. And my initial approach to it was not good. I don't know if I've talked about much about that or not, but initially when I approached that role, because we had months to kind of develop it. We did a film right before that called 8, and that had some pretty decent success. overseas and in the United States as well. But that kind of certainly got the ball rolling to know that we were going to do another one enough to where we could really start developing it and know that it was going to get made and we were going to do this, and that was what Buzzard was. So we spent months thinking about Joel was writing it, and then we'd do, table reads and workshop it and all kinds of stuff. So, there were times when I was just like approaching it, and I hadn't really studied any acting at that point either. So everything that I learned was,
which is unbelievable in itself.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes when I watch it, I'm like, it shows for sure. I'm just like, oh man, I don't know if I approached that right. But regardless, I was kind of reading everything I could because I knew that we were definitely going to be making that movie, and I wanted to be as prepared as possible. But I didn't know anything about preparation. I hadn't been coached at all in regards to that. So my initial approach was quite wrong, in my opinion, that I did some quote unquote method things because I was under the impression that was what you were supposed to do. And a lot of it involved a lot of pain, and being in a very dark place. And that wasn't really good or necessary, I don't think. But eventually I got out of that and went to just kind of an honest place about what it feels like to have just any type of frustration or anything in the world, because that was something that was not lost on me. I think everybody experiences that, to one degree or another. So especially the stuff with the relationship with his mother specifically, I have a great relationship with my mother, but there were times in my life when, she was a single mother, and my dad was around, but, she bore the brunt of like working and getting us to school and all of that, so there were times when like the relationship was just automatically strained by circumstances, and so I felt alienated in doing things like wanting to be a musician or a filmmaker or whatever my endeavors were, because it was not easy thing to approach. And she was probably a little disappointed because she knew how difficult it would be for me. And in the Midwest, like, it's just kind of a weird thing. You don't really necessarily want your kids to go into, like you want your kids to have some sort of happiness and stability in life. And our artists aren't always privileged to that. So yeah, there's lots of things about it, and there's things, just like the physical stuff, like Joel is in the film. Joel Petrakis, who wrote and directed the film, he's in it, as well as my friend Derek, and there's scenes where we're fighting and things like that, and it's just like, man, that is really tough to kind of get into, do where I'm so angry with him, then we get so physical so quickly, like such an eruption of that, and we did, I think, 2 or 3 takes, not many though, because it was just so mentally and physically exhausting to just display that type of rage, over and over again. And yeah, those things were really difficult. At that time, I think they would be now even, but especially at that time, like having no idea like how to kind of get there and do that without, in a lot of ways, going there actually,
And the scene that almost everybody talks about, which is, which screams volumes about Marty, right, is he spends his last $20 on room service spaghetti, right? Which I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times, like a scene that is talked about over and over again. But, he's a Hot Pockets Mountain Dew guy, and that's who he is. And it's so easy I want to ask you about the spaghetti, but the other thing I want to ask you is, it's so easy to throw on the word like loser, right? Because you have a guy here, and I was reading some stuff online today. This guy is so complex, right? And he doesn't, you break it down and you look at what he's gone through, who he is, it's just, one word just doesn't, you can't just brush away somebody and describe them with one word. I feel like there's such depth to all people, not just Marty, but all people, right? So, and I think your performance kind of brings that out. And when I hear you say, you're not hard on yourself, but you said, some of these things I would have, but I feel like anything you would have changed might have had a domino effect, right? When I read the reviews I read, when I know I saw what I saw, I think what you did was just phenomenal. And I feel like there should be no changes. So I guess I'm throwing a lot of things at you once, but I do want to talk about he's a complex guy, right? And there's always a tendency in life to describe somebody with one word, lazy or with this or that. But I feel like Marty is proof that things are a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. And I mean, really, a lot of the dynamics in that character is in the writing. Like Joel just did a fantastic job with that, and knowing, some of those the smaller things about his life that are huge to him. Like that's like a crucial aspect to it. And understanding that, performing it is one thing, but coming from Joel's brain and having the luxury of working closely with Joel for a while to, iron it out and make it what you end up seeing on the screen was so collaborative. But I mean, I appreciate you saying that, because he really was a nuanced character. And yes, slacker and loser certainly got thrown around in a lot of the reviews, which we were fine with, but but we also would clarify, I mean, this guy is really like, in his brain, he's doing all he can, and he's kind of at the top of it, and he's feeling very assured. He's very confident in what he's what his approach to life, and as misguided as it may be, he certainly has a lot of disdain for the people that care about him or that are helping him out in life, but that's just one of the character flaws, and maybe in his just view of the world, but it's just whether it is his family or his best friend or his boss or whoever, it's just kind of like he doesn't really fully understand that that these are the people that support him, and that he is taking advantage of them and bringing pain and hurt and onto them, which is, I don't know, it's just so that's a sad situation to be in. But through all those nuances, and this is something obviously I think that anybody who learns in acting is you always defend the character. And so from my perspective, Marty was always making the right choice, about what he wanted to do and how he felt like he needed to go about doing it. So there was nothing like bad or loserish about him. Like he felt very confident and self-assured,
Yeah. And maybe poor decision with spending your last money on room service pasta, but whatever. But was that scene fun to shoot for you, or was it difficult? Or both?
It was both. I mean, it was fun because we only had the one plate of spaghetti. Producer Kevin Clancy made the homemade plate of spaghetti. We had the one plate with the meatballs and everything. I did not know we were going to go right into that shot immediately after dinner, so I ordered a whole basket of fish and chips and everything, man, and I ate it, and the fish and chips were delicious, man. We ate in the restaurant of the hotel that we shot it at, and it's a nice hotel. The food was nice, and so I was like, oh, this is great. And then Joel's like, okay, so now we're gonna do the spaghetti scene. I'm like, right now. So, but it was great, man. It was great to, just, I knew we had one take, and that's all we had. We only had the one plate. My stomach was already full, so you might as well just go for it. And that's really all that happened, man.
Yeah.
Joel just let the camera roll, and I just kept going, and then eventually he said, cut.
Yeah, and randomly, I was over the weekend, I was watching an interview with Rob Lowe, and he was talking about how one of the things he loves to, who also has a podcast, by the way, who is one of his favorite things to do is to watch actors like eat on camera, when they're eating, whether to see if he can notice who is fake eating, who is actually eating. It was weird, but I was thinking of the scene with the spaghetti, but that clearly he was not talking about that. But it's funny when he was just talking about how he analyzes with his wife about, who's really eating, who's not eating. I mean, it's a Rob Lowe thing, I guess,
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, he might be even talking about, for continuity's sake, I always think about that too. Like I've never had a scene where I had to fake eat. You know, like if I've eaten in a movie, it's very deliberate and I'm very much actually eating, you know?
Right,
So
right,
like,
right.
I wonder like what it's like to like cut the steak and pretend like you're taking a bite, you know? Like I've never had to do that. Like I've not, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
You just kind of pick at the plate with your fork, you know? Like I watch actors do that, you know, it's so that they, you know, they don't have to keep resetting the plate or whatever. But for me, I've never had that experience. It's always been like, you've got to actually eat. The
Right.
cameras, this is the point of the shot is you eating, you know? So it's like, that's funny. I have to look that up to see what Rob Lowe's thoughts are on
that. So the reason I kind of spent a lot of time on Buzzard, one is because I loved it, but two, it really opens the door to the Revenant, right? They see it's through, if my memory serves me correctly, it's the casting director through Joel, I think, but maybe you'll clarify this when I in a second. But it opens the door, and I feel like your performance really caught some people's attention, which is fantastic. Talk about that transition if you don't mind, and we'll end the interview just talking about The Revenant, which is obviously one of the all-time great movies ever made for a bunch of reasons. But your performance in Buzzard, I feel, gives it turned some heads. It caught some attention. Do I have that correct, Joshua?
Yeah, absolutely. Buzzard. It still is. It's so strange. Joel and the cinematographer Adam Minnick, we all still talk about it. How people still approach us about it, and how far that film has reached out. We just had no idea that it was going to happen like that. We were so excited to have the world premiere at South by Southwest, and that's all we really knew. And then right before we were, or maybe like while we were going to South by Southwest, because we took a giant van down, like we all packed into some large vehicle. I don't even remember if it was a van. It could have been like a large SUV or something. But there was a bunch of us, and we all packed in there and drove from Michigan to Austin. And like while we were on the road, like things were happening. Like our film had been picked up for distribution before it even played the festival by Oscilloscope Laboratories. And the reviews were coming in, and it was becoming like a must-see thing at South by Southwest, and we weren't even at the festival yet. And so we're just like, what is going on? You know, like it was just so surreal to have that all happening. And after the film was played South by Southwest, while we were at South by Southwest, we were invited to do New Directors, New Films in New York at MoMA and Lincoln Center. And that was insane. So we went 2 weeks later to New York, and from there, then the New York Times and A.O. Scott's writing a review of it. And it's just like, what is happening? You know, and you think then that's done. We all go home, you know, and back in Michigan. And I got a call from a casting director for a major motion picture. And they wanted me to do an audition. I had no idea how to even do an audition or tape it or whatever. So we did it and sent it off. I didn't get the part, but that same casting agency was in charge of The Revenant, and they called me a month later or so, or a couple weeks. I don't remember the time exactly, just shortly thereafter. And they got a hold of me because I had my own private number on my IMDb at the time. So they just looked me up on IMDb, and that was my personal phone number. And they just called my phone, and I was home like playing video games, and they asked me to send in this tape for this fur trapping movie starring Leo DiCaprio. And I was like, what? That's crazy. And so I called Joel, and Joel came over and we taped it. And, you know, I had to do several tapes. That process was like that, you know, because I was in Michigan and they were in, I don't know, Calgary or Los Angeles or wherever they were at. And, it happened. I ended up getting the part. So, it was very strange because casting was calling me, and like I didn't have any representation at the time, no management, no agent. So they were talking to me, which they felt at first sort of uncomfortable about. And they were just like, "Are you sure we should be talking to you?" I'm like, "I don't know who else you're going to talk to."
Any pressure? Because I think I have this part right too. Is that you auditioned in front of Alejandro Iñárritu? Was any pressure doing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, even that. I mean, I guess there would have been if I had time to think about it, but I really didn't. I had done a few tapes for them along the way, and I'd stopped shaving. They specifically said you're on the short list or whatever, so stop shaving and stop cutting your hair, because that's what they want for everybody. So just it could put you in that camp at least. Like, so like casting was very helpful to me in a lot of ways. Just like, so now you're gonna go do this now, and I was like, great. And and they gave me a call and they said they wanted to see you in person, fly on an airplane to Calgary and do this live audition for Alejandro. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And they said, yeah, the caveat is that the plane leaves in an hour. Can you be to the airport in an hour? We've already bought the ticket. And I said, oh, sure. So I made it there, and from the airport went to the hotel. From the hotel, got picked up by transport, went to the production office. From there, went up to the audition for Alejandro, whisked back in the van, back to the airport, back home in time for dinner the next day. So it was just like, yeah, I guess I would have certainly felt pressure, but the whole situation was so bizarre that I was just kind of going with it, trying to be in the right place, just so that I didn't miss my ride.
Leaving, did you feel like you hit it? Like when you finished the audition, did you feel like you did something pretty special?
No, not at all. I thought it was a really cool experience. That's the way I felt. I was like, regardless of what happens, like that was so cool to meet Alejandro. And how it happened is he walked me in the room, and there were all these other people around from production and whoever else. It was a room full of people, but he sat me down, so there's other people kind of watching, and we chatted for like 15 minutes, and he's just kind of like, I heard you're into music and you do that or whatever. And it was really like kind of comforting or disarming or whatever. So I felt great. It was nice to just talk to another filmmaker, even if it was Alejandro. Like it was a really cool experience. So he's like, oh, we got to do the audition. You cool with that? I'm like, yeah, it's great. So yeah, I went and did the audition. I didn't feel particularly great about it. I had to do some improv, which I was not particularly skilled at. But I just kind of was like, wow, that was amazing. I actually did that. I went through that. I knew I didn't totally bomb it, but there was nothing about it in my brain that I was like, wow, I really felt great about that. I remember getting in the transport and being like, how'd you feel? And I was like, I don't know. It was a really great experience. Like, I can't believe that I flew up here and got to meet Alejandro and audition for him. Like, that's incredible. And then I got back on a Friday, and I went out and had dinner on a Monday. And while I was at dinner, I got a call, and they said, you got it. Pack your bags. You're going to Canada. And I just couldn't believe it. And that's when, like,
you must have been
dropped out of my face.
Oh, I was going to say, you must have been out of your head when you got that call. Oh my God.
No, I lost my appetite. I couldn't finish my meal. Like I was like, I couldn't even sit down at the table anymore. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I'll we'll get a rain check. We'll do this again. But I don't even know what to make of this right now. Like, it was just so unbelievable.
Oh, that's
shaking. And yeah. Man.
Oh, that's awesome. And let me ask you this. So, along with the beard, they tell you, what, maybe drop some pounds too. Not that you were heavy, but they wanted, a certain look. Is that true too? They asked you to go on a diet?
Well, that was much later. So,
okay.
We went on break for the holidays. So we started shooting in October, and we went on break for the holidays. So Christmas, New Year's, and during that time, they kind of sent out a memo. Because we were shooting the film chronologically, if you've seen the film, I don't think it's a spoiler at this point, but these guys are trapped out in the wilderness. And so because we shot it chronologically, by the time we came back from break, they wanted to make sure that we didn't overeat for the holidays or something, whatever. They wanted us to look very gaunt and decrepit, that we had been out in the wilderness for a long time, not doing well.
Yeah.
And again, I still didn't have any representation. I had nobody to bounce this off of. So I took it upon myself to being like, oh, I've got to lose weight and look terrible, and that's what I did. And I lost quite a bit of weight in a short amount of time. And I kind of wrote production. I was just like, am I doing this right? How far am I supposed to go? And I told them how much I'd lost and everything. And they were like, whoa, stop. You don't need to. So, but I didn't have any experience. Like, I was totally so green, and I had nobody to really discuss that with. So I just kind of was like, well, I guess I'll just try to lose weight however I would lose it. And so I did that, and I got back, and it was kind of a bit of a joke, and everybody was kind of like, man, you really lost weight. And I was like, I know, I didn't even know I had it to lose. They're just like, well, good job, man. You doing all right? I'm like, yeah, I feel great, but it's just like, man. But I don't recommend it to anybody. Please find somebody that knows what they're doing. Don't be an idiot like I was and just go blindly into it. Like, it was just, something it was very dangerous, and I shouldn't have done it. I don't mean to romanticize it, and it's certainly nobody in production's fault. It's totally in my head, and I went and made that choice to do that, and it took a while to recover, to be honest, man, because you can mess your body up pretty good doing stuff like that. So please don't do that at home, kids.
Yes. You're making all good points, and for those listening, I mean, 12 nominations, 3 Academy Award nominations, 3 wins. Quite truthfully, Joshua, it's maybe the most beautiful film I've ever seen. And I'm talking, forget the plot. Let's put that aside for a second, which is phenomenal. But just from the Emmanuel's cinematography to Sakamoto's music, to the way it looks, the way it sounds, I don't think I can find a more beautiful movie. I don't think I can.
I'm kind of there with you, man. I don't think it's bias. I think that movie is just incredible to look at. I mean, I went to the premiere, and that was obviously the first time I saw it, but seeing it on that screen, man, it was unbelievable. I didn't even watch it again for a really long time because I think the emotions of it, of having gone through it and spent that much time on the set and doing that, and like, it was such an adventure to do, and then to have it come out so beautifully like that, it was just, I mean, it's not an overstatement to say it's one of the highlights of my life. I mean, it was just, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd have such an experience. Over the course of, we started in 2014, I guess, and the premiere was December of 2015, and then just that year and a half, almost, whatever it was, 2 years almost. Like, I mean, that was just such an extraordinary, I don't know, it was just so wild, man. I can't believe it to this day that I was a part of it. It's such a thrill still.
Yeah, shot in 12 locations in like 3 to 4 countries, Canada, US, Argentina, just the way that whoever the location scout is should be commended beyond belief. So let me ask you, we talk about where it was shot, how beautiful it looks. Your personal, I know you kind of talked a little about this, but your personal shooting schedule, are you out there in the woods for 7 months? How does that work? How does where you stay, how is that? Because I was reading a lot today, right? And I feel like this was an intense set. And I don't mean that like not safe or, it was not a fun place to be, but I feel like Alejandro was so committed to creating something really, really special, as was Leo and the whole cast and crew. I get that. You read stories about some people quitting because, it's not easy, right? I mean, he wanted to create this really premium product, and clearly he succeeded. I guess my 2 questions are, one, what was your surroundings like? I think it was for 7 months, maybe a little bit longer. You were shooting. How was that? And 2, because I was reading one story about, DiCaprio's as Hugh Glass is filming a scene with his son, and it got so cold you could see the actor's jaw like clattering, with his teeth, and the camera it freezes up too. So Leo was like, okay, let's wrap it. But I feel like this is all in an attempt to create something really beautiful, and again, it succeeded. So talk about your shooting experiences, and 2, is what I'm saying and how I'm reading into it, am I somewhat accurate?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. I don't recall being on set for a lot of those days when they had to shut down production because the cameras were freezing. That did in fact happen, and I know that the actors came back and told us about the story, like the cameras were freezing up. Like that is a very true story. Like it would get that cold, and how it worked. Just again, it goes back to Alejandro wanting it to be chronological. So in a normal film, as much as I worked on that film, I would have been in and out in a few weeks or something like that for whatever, right? But because it was chronological, the adventure and just the exhaustion and going through all that became part of the process, and showing the film and making the film and telling the story that Alejandro wanted to tell. That became such a part of the film itself. So we'd go up to these locations and stay in hotels or lodges or whatever, because we were up in the mountains. So, even if we were as close as possible to these locations, which were largely untouched, which was again a specific idea of Alejandro's, that he wanted to, wilderness that still hadn't been touched by man. So we'd take these logging roads, which were the only humans that had been back there, and we'd take them to where they ended and then go further, So it's like, beyond that, we were staying in these lodges or wherever, miles away from these locations, and sometimes for days and weeks. And I'd go to one location and I'd just stay in the lodge or the complex the entire time without even working, because there wasn't a scene where my characters needed during that time period. Which in normal movies that would not be the case, because you'd want to get the actors worked and get them out of there for whatever reason, budgetary or otherwise. And but this was just an adventure from beginning to start, or from beginning to end. Like that was the film making process. So it was just so intense and crazy for that reason. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the stories that you've heard, a lot of them are true. Some of them are not. I think they've all pretty much been debunked now, but there was a lot of negative stuff that came out that wasn't necessarily true. But
about the bear, which was ridiculous. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that came out that was like, come on, like really? I mean, but this is like the more practical stuff, like when you're shooting right out in these beautiful scenic places. Is there one that sticks out to you, Joshua, that was just absolutely stunning? I mean, they're all stunning, but is there a particular place where you're like, holy mother of God, this is beautiful?
Well, I will say there is one, but before I say that, there was it was a general sense that you were surrounded in that beauty all of the time. So because I had never experienced anything like this before, I had never worked on something of this scale. I had literally come from working with my friends in my hometown to something like this. So anytime that I felt overwhelmed, it was nice to be in those locations and just kind of stare off into the mountains or the woods or wherever and just be impressed by. So every location was pretty much stunning, but the one that stands out the most is we had to take a helicopter for whatever reason. I think there was a wind pattern or a weather pattern that came in called a Chinook that sort of hurt the production in the way that it was unseasonably warm for the time that we were there. So we had to keep going higher and higher elevations to get snow and to keep snow. So there was one particular shot where we went to the top of this mountain. I don't remember how high it was, several thousand feet. I don't remember exactly, but taking the helicopter there across all these mountains, so far it seemed, just watching these mountains. I'd never been in a helicopter before. And you're just flying through these mountains and, it just feels like the propeller could hit these mountains. You're so close. Obviously you couldn't, but it's just, that was amazing. Then it just get dropped off and then you just watch the helicopter take off in the distance and get smaller and smaller. And the sound is quieter and quieter till it's nothing. And then there you are with your buddies on the top of this mountain. And it was a skeleton crew. Like not everybody went. So Chivo was there, Alejandro was there, and the cast is there pretty much. And you just look out and you're above the clouds, of course, and you can see as far as your eyes can see. And I never had my glasses on set, so my sight was not. I couldn't see very far, but it was just. I don't think I've ever had a feeling like that. Just like being that high and above the clouds, just standing there, like. Anytime I've been high like that, I've been in an airplane or a tall building or something. I just never. So I'm just never going to forget standing on that mountain with a handful of people making this movie, getting these shots, and it was just incredible. Yeah. But every location was amazing, man.
That's awesome. And, the movie is shot in sequence. Hardy talks about how he watched Platoon, Tom Berenger, to kind of get an idea of where he wanted to take his character. Is there anybody or any study that you use for Stubby Bill?
A little bit. I just kind of, just in a general sense, I didn't use a person the way that Tom discussed with Tom Berenger, but I just kind of thought that these guys had lived a pretty hard life, and I just assumed that medicine was not great back then, and even if they were younger, I felt like their lungs would be pretty damaged from whatever hard life they had. I thought that Stubby Bill, eventually I came up with the idea that he was probably from Steubenville, Ohio, and traveled down the Ohio River to get to St. Louis. And so it was lost in translation. And then somewhere in St. Louis amongst the French and the other people that were using that as the gateway to the West, that his name became Stubby Bill. And so I just kind of, for his voice was just kind of like, what was one of the lines he said? Yeah, I'm out here. I'm starting to miss your wife. You know, it was like at the very top of the lungs because the lung capacity was not there anymore. Yeah. So maybe he's just kind of, you know, that was the most I did. That part was, this is one of the weird disappointments I have that, when everybody else, there was a dialect coach there, Howard Samuelson, great guy. And you had to meet with him, you know, before shooting and just kind of get some pointers about what your character sounds like, you know, go over accents and dialogue, whatever. And everybody else had like a very specific region that they were from, and I didn't really have one. So when I went in and did my Stubby Bill voice, he said like Alejandro's only notes to him were like, he kind of likes it, just have him go with it. And so like I didn't get the experience of like working on accents and dialect with like a coach, you know, like I didn't, but it's all right, you know, but I had enough to worry about, I guess. So it's had enough on my plate. So, but
yeah, it's shot in sequence, which you never see. Right. And the fact that he's happy with what you're doing, you got to be thrilled with that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Again, like I was so green and just so inexperienced. I was just thrilled to be there. And it was very basic. I didn't want to screw things up, you know. It's like when you see something of that scale and there's that many people involved and everybody's working so hard at the top of their game and they're world-class talent, everybody, the cast, the crew, it's like there's enough pressure to just not want to be the one guy that screws it up, you know?
Yeah. And thank you for all this time. I have two quick questions for you. You know, the one scene that really sticks with me and a lot of other people is right at Empire Strikes Back is when Leo cuts open the horse, very much like the Tauntaun, ESB. Mm-hmm. You know, what a wonderful scene that was. You know, we talked about how you were swept up in everything at the beginning, right? When does it finally hit you, right? So you described so eloquently the scenic, you know, part of it, of being in that helicopter. When does it really hit you when it's like, holy S, I am with this actor and this director? Is there a time where it really settles in? Because I imagine you have some time there where you're alone with your thoughts, right? So not to make it overly dramatic, but is there a time where you're like, oh my God, like this is for real? Is there a moment of like clarity like that for you, Joshua? Or are you just so pent up in everything that's going on, you don't have time to think about that?
No, it was very early on. It was when we went to the production office and where they were setting up and building props and doing costume fitting, like almost day one. Like once I went into that building and saw like all the costumes and all the level of detail to all the props, and I saw the stuntmen rehearsing and saw Leo doing camera tests and everybody else getting dressed to go do camera tests. And I was just like, I was floored. Like and we started rehearsing like the next day or two, you know, but by then, like I was already well aware, but I just had never seen a production. I'd read about productions like this, you know, like I knew in my mind's eye, I guess, or whatever the word is, that, you know, that they existed, you know, but to actually be there and to know that like this is a damn movie. Like, you know, like it was just like, holy cow. Like my excitement level shot through the roof. And just hang on tight, man, was like kind of like my mentality, you know, like every day I was writing Joel back or whatever, just be like, dude, you're not going to believe like what went on today, like at the production. Cause we loved making movies. We're such movie nerds anyway. It was just so fun, like to be experiencing that stuff, you know, like, and it's just incredible.
Yeah. Leo was so exhausted that he took a couple of years off before he accepted Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Did you feel that level of exhaustion as well? Because, you know, you're out there filming, you're doing your thing. Did you feel exhausted when it was all said and done, Josh?
No. I felt elation and excitement enough to where I turned around and went to LA like almost straight away after that. Like we wrapped, I got back home in April and I went to LA in July. So that was just, I knew straight away that I wanted to, you know, give it a college try, to like give it a shot to keep working on movies. It was my first thing. Like Leo, like he went through things on that I can't even fathom. So, you know, and he you know, and he won the Oscar, and, you know, he's got time to like pick and decide what he wants his next role to be. And he can do that because he's one of the best ever, you know? So
right.
you know, he's got a different thing going on there than I do. So I was just like,
yeah, each in your own way though, Josh. I get what you're saying. You know, it's Leo, but each in your own way, right? Because before, I mean, you have some experience before that coming into your filmography. You have some good things, good projects you've done, but nothing like this, right? Nothing like being away from home for a long period. So there, I mean, I get what you're saying, but you know, there is a lot of hard work being poured on your end too. I mean, I'm not going to compare anybody to Leo, but like in your own way, my gosh, that's you still put forth a lot of work and effort and so forth, you know? Well,
sure I did. But I mean, when it's literally your dream job, I mean, you know, it's
yeah, I got you. Yeah.
You know, it's everything you want to do. Like, that's how you want to work. It's what you want to learn. You're so excited to learn more, to like get more knowledge, to get better at what you're doing, to, you know, to meet more people, to have more discussions, to learn. Like, that's so exhilarating. Like, that's the fuel. Like, so I was filled with fuel, man. Like I was not exhausted at all. Like I was like pumped up and ready to go and on to the next adventure, you know, like it was amazing, man.
Yeah. Josh, I almost feel like that what really makes this movie, outside of everything we've talked about, is, you know, he's only got like 10 minutes of dialogue. It's almost like Castaway in the sense that it's this, but this is a little bit more powerful, I think, than Castaway, but it's the silence that makes it, right? You're absorbing these scenes, and you are so privileged enough to go through it, you know, and see him up close, but to see that silence and to hear that music, man, it's like, it's perfect. It's perfect movie making. It's just perfect.
Yeah. There's a lot more to acting than words.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, people make a big deal out of that. Speaking of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I know there was a big thing about that. Margot Robbie, her not having a lot of dialogue or whatever, but she didn't need it, man.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree.
She's so special in that film, man. And Buster Keaton didn't need it, you know? And it's just like,
sometimes there's too much talking in movies, Joshua. It's like just stop. Like, just enough with the words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's one of the first things that Joel and the rest of the Sob Noise crew, Sob Noise is our film band, if you will. One of the first things we do when we sit down with our first time to workshop, we cut all the exposition, man. We cut all the exposition dialogue. We don't need it. We're going to show all that stuff. You don't need it. You know, there's way too many words. That's not the story. The story is it's a moving painting. Leonardo da Vinci said one day there's going to be paintings that move, you know, and what an amazing thing that would be. And that's what movies are, man. You know, it's incredible. So I nothing against people that are great at dialogue and you know, playwrights or whoever, you know, like the screenwriters that do utilize that. Nothing against that, but it's not the end all be all of what makes a film. You know, it's just one part of it, and you can still make some of the most beautiful things ever, beautiful images, and tell the most beautiful stories ever without dialogue.
Yeah, and the real story of Hugh Glass is so much more stunning when you read the book. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, it is powerful as The Revenant is. Like, when you really read what he went through, it's unbelievable. My last question to you is, could you ever live out in the wilderness 1823? Could you have been that guy?
I don't know. I've thought about this a great deal, and I've thought about it. The guy I am right now could not do it, but the guy I am in my mentality, if I were alive in 1823, maybe. Maybe, because, you know, back then, I mean, they had the technology was the most they had back then, so that's kind of what I am now. If anything, I'm using less technology than a lot of people, you know,
right,
for the times that we live in. So I don't know. I don't know if I would have been rugged. I've been in some pretty hard spots, before, but they're all like in the modern context, and I don't know. I've thought about that before. I certainly am not anxious to give it a shot.
I get it.
But it is fun to think about.
Hey, man, I got to tell you, there's times where people just get to me. Like, you just have to watch the news for 2 minutes to figure that out. And if I didn't have my beautiful wife and my daughter, if my path had gone down a different road, I absolutely could be. Would I be successful? Probably not. But I absolutely could be off the radar. I want to end the interview with this. I read this today, and I could not stop laughing. Like, I just kept thinking about this all day. Would you end the interview talking about the interaction that you and Tom Hardy had on a daily basis, where you guys were blind? So I think people listening, what a great way to end the interview, if you don't mind, Joshua.
Sure, I'd love to. Tom was a really fun guy. He still is. I just, my one experience was 7 months of experience, I guess, with him was all the years ago on the set for this film, and he was a very fun guy, and he was very great at bringing levity to very extreme situations that we were all in together. And one of those things, my character's name was Stubby Bill, and his character's name was Fitzgerald, John Fitzgerald. And somewhere along the line, very early on in the production, he'd look at me in his voice that he was doing in character and just say, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill." And then I didn't know what to say at first, I'm just like, this is damn Tom Hardy, man. Look what I'm going to say back to him. Somewhere along the line, I just started saying, "God damn it, Fitzgerald," in my voice, as the character, which was funny. And so we kept doing it. And Tom just, every time he'd see me on set, it just, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill. God damn it, Fitzgerald. Fuck you, Stubby Bill." And you just hear it from across the wilderness. "Fuck you, Stubby Bill. God damn it, Fitzgerald." And it got to be like we're like in the hotel, like in the restaurant in the hotel, and I hear across the restaurant, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill. God damn it, Fitzgerald." Every day in the makeup, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill. God damn it, Fitzgerald." It became like this call and response. It was so fun. And I remember one day, it was right before a shot that I had to do. I don't remember. It was not a huge shot, but again, I had to be so focused because I'm not that good of an actor. So I was just thinking about whatever I was going to do. And Tom walks by me and he goes, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill." And either I didn't hear him, I was just thinking about something else, and I didn't respond, right? So Tom comes back and he squares me up with his shoulders, and he looks me straight in the eyes like, now in Tom's voice, "Listen, mate, if you don't say it back, it doesn't work." And I'm like, "Oh, right, man. Yeah, sure. God damn it, Fitzgerald. My bad. Yeah. I'll remember next time." And then we'd laugh, and then we'd go on. But it got to be where everybody on set started saying, "Fuck you, Stubby Bill." It just caught on like wildfire. It became the thing to say, man. Yeah. I love Tom, man. He's a great guy, man. It was a thrill to be able to work with him.
Oh, man, that's beautiful, man. I love hearing stories like that. What's around the corner for you? What projects you have? Anything? What's going on in the world of Joshua coming up? Stuff is still brewing? Anything you want to say now? The floor is yours, my friend.
All right. Well, there is a film that I did get a release date for. We wrapped a film called Cosmic Dawn that we wrapped in 2019, and everybody knows what happened in 2020, so I don't need to get into it. But it is finally coming out now, February 11th of 2022, coming up soon. So look for that. It'll be streaming, maybe theaters. I don't know. The details will come out. So follow up on that. I just finished a film in Alabama a couple of weeks ago, in Tennessee, a film called Don't Die. So that's in post-production now. So stay tuned for when that's coming out. Music-wise, I'm working on a new record. So I'm going to put together a collection of songs that'll be free for anyone who wants to listen on Bandcamp or whatever, just kind of arts and crafts at this point. But I'm keeping busy going into the holidays here, man, and hopefully 2022 brings good tidings and fortune and care and all the great things.
Joshua, you're a good dude, man. I'm a fan for life. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, Derek, thank you, man. I love your podcast, man. It was absolutely thrilled to be on here, man. You do great work.
Thank you for listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also connect with Monday Morning Critic on Instagram and Facebook, MDM Critic on Twitter, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. All episodes available, www.mmcpodcast.com.